You're listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com and sound off. And now it's time to drop some knowledge.
Okay, we're live, but we got to let the stream breathe just for a second here. Got to bring in Facebook, get everybody together before we dive in. And we are good. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast, presented, as always, by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, my co-host, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, there's a lot to talk about today as we sift through the aftermath of the Broncos' Week 14 victory over the Panthers. But what I just can't understand, I'm seeing it on Twitter, I'm seeing it on Facebook, I'm seeing it on the comments on our YouTube channel. The haters, dude, in Broncos country are a thing. I don't understand why such a large swath of Broncos country, instead of looking they are looking the gift horse in the mouth with regard to Drew Lock. Instead of just going right on, we finally saw some really strong signs of progress. They're going,
Chad, real quick, let them hate. It's exactly why we have this shirt. It's exactly why we have the hashtag, exactly why we have the mindset around this podcast about Drew Lock. It's because, like we mentioned last night, Chad, some people, not just Broncos fans, refuse to be happy. They love reveling in misery. They love being righteous and indignatious about something, and that's exactly what these Drew Lock haters are. If they were fans of Denver, true fans of Denver, they want to see Lock do well because that means the Broncos are doing well. They want to root for the young quarterback and not root against him. They're rooting for the name on the back of the jersey, not the front of the jersey. Those aren't true fans to me.
I just think it's ridiculous. I've also been tagged or added, whatever you want to call it, on Twitter, saw it on YouTube, saw it on Facebook as well, from fans saying that, Chad and Zack at Mile High Huddle they've already put Drew Lock in the Hall of Fame. And
so ridiculous. It couldn't be further from the truth.
It's funny to see. I mean, because these same people, we don't really see them in the stream. Like, we're not seeing them as much. Not to say that we don't get dissent and we don't get good, vibrant conversation and engagement in our live streams, but these same people, they don't come at us when we're live, because then we can actually talk about it. We could suss it out. We could address the issues. Listen, no one here, even counting yesterday's game in Carolina, no one here is saying Drew Lock is the man, book it, it's done, guaranteed. We've never said that, ever. All right? I think the closest we've gotten, Zack, is that we've said, and I'll just speak for myself, the closest I've gotten is by saying the kid has franchise tools. I've been saying that since before he was drafted. And he's just raw. He needs time. He needs to be developed. And then the most recent thing I said on the topic before the Panthers game was that if it were up to me, I'm the Broncos. I've invested this far. I've built the nest up to this point. I've put in the effort and time and man hours to develop him up to this point. I'm giving him 2021. I don't see how that, Zack, can be interpreted as putting him in the Hall of Fame.
I understand the tweet you're referencing, because I want to answer it on Twitter, because you might want to get your hearing checked. Whoever is the invisible pseudo hater out there listening to us, I said on last night's pod specifically, this doesn't make him the guy. This doesn't make him a Pro Bowler, just as a loss didn't make him a bust. Or did it make him not the guy? The truth is always somewhere in the middle. And we've been fairly balanced and objective with Locke, praising him where it's been warranted and criticizing him where it's been warranted as well. Yesterday happened to have been a really good game by a young quarterback. And when that young quarterback has been struggling the entire season, or most of it, he throws for 4 touchdowns, no picks, a passer rating above 149. After what Broncos country witnessed since Peyton Manning, the Simeons, Osweilers, Lynch, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, why wouldn't you want to see and enjoy and experience a young quarterback stepping up and taking ownership of that role? You can still be tentative and apprehensive about crowning him or going forward with Locke as the quarterback, but at least recognize it was a major step forward, a leap forward for a young quarterback, and it makes the Broncos better when he's better. It works hand in hand.
I want you guys to take a look at something here and tell me if this is the mark of a fool's gold, excuse me, or of a quarterback that is, it's not real, right? It's a fugazi, however you want to pronounce it. Locke has career day against Panthers. Let me read to you. I'll list it for those listening. There are 5 quarterbacks in Broncos history, or I should say 5 single-game performances by Broncos quarterbacks of 146 quarterback rating or greater. 2 of the names on the list are Peyton Manning and John Elway, and the other one is Drew Lock. As you can see here, it was on Sunday, Drew Lock's 149.5 QB rating was the 3rd highest single-game rating for a Broncos quarterback ever. The only 2 that have done better was Peyton Manning back in 2014 in that San Francisco game where he threw touchdown number 509 to break the Brett Favre record. And then John Elway back in 95 against Arizona. I was actually at that game with 156. So it goes Peyton Manning, 157.2, John Elway, 156, and then Drew Lock. Now, that could be, it's fair to say, Zach, that could be an outlier. It could end up being a flash in the pan. But listen to me, it's not. Do you realize how many things, Zach, have to go right in order to produce a game like this?
Right.
You talked about this on Twitter yesterday after the game, Zach, after we were done streaming, about because one of the arguments is, well, but it was Carolina. They're a losing team. They don't have a great defense. But I want to say on Twitter, you talked about or you focused on some of the quarterback performances this year that have gone against Carolina. Yep. It hasn't been pretty. That's a better defense than you think. And besides, even if it's one of the worst, it's the NFL.
Right. Exactly. I don't care. Like I said yesterday, I don't care if it's Coastal Carolina or the Carolina Panthers, Chad. They held Justin Herbert to 1 touchdown, the Panthers defense. They shut out Matt Ryan. They shut out Matt Stafford. Those are 2 quarterbacks, by the way, including Stafford, who many Broncos fans want to replace Locke. This Panthers defense isn't the best, but they're hardly the worst either. And like Chad said, still getting paid to. They still were trying to win that game, and they gave their all. The Broncos were just better, and Locke was just better. He beat an NFL defense, and dare I say, with 4 passing touchdowns, and that efficient passing, Chat, 280, 77.7% completion percentage. That almost 80% is ridiculously good at the NFL level. Again, it doesn't exonerate him. It doesn't prove anything one way or the other. In a vacuum, in a singular bubble, this was a great effort by a young quarterback. That's all.
I'm just trying to understand why so many Broncos fans seem to be almost upset that it happened. Is it because you had already turned the page? Is it and you are looking forward or hoping for the Broncos to take a quarterback top 10 in 2021? Is it a pride thing? That you ran your mouth so much, whether it be on social media, whether it be with your friends, your family, that now to go back on it, you don't want to do that. I don't know. But as Zach said, this isn't definitive. This doesn't, close the book on Drew Lock. If anything, Zach, it just opens it wider. There's still so many questions around Drew. But I think the takeaway for fans coming out of this game is that you wanted to see the progress. You wanted to see the signs of development. Forget Pat Shurmur, forget Mike Shula, forget Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. You wanted to see Drew Lock take actual, quantifiable, empirical steps forward, and he did that. So let's see what he can do in these final 3 games. And I'll tell you this, there's been a lot of fans, Zach, that have reached out to me and said, listen, I'll give him his props. It's good to see. I was stoked to see it. If he can do it against Buffalo, though, then I'll be a believer.
Yeah.
But how many of those same people – if he does do it again against Buffalo, and it's probably, odds are, look at how often a game like that is produced in Broncos history. He's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be an average Drew Lock game. But if he does, how many of those same people, if he produces again against Buffalo, are going to go, well, if he can close out the season,
right.
It's just, you just keep kicking the can down the road. Just love what you have, accept what you have, be excited about what you saw because it was a rare performance. And it's just, look, crappy quarterbacks can't do that. Okay. They're not able to do that. So this is when everything went right. Now it's on the coaches and Locke. It's got to keep pushing, Zach, but it's on the coaches to figure out how to manufacture similar that same process so that he can continue to do it. Because they were onto quite a few things in yesterday's game. They got to keep that going.
I think it's indisputable to say that, and I think you're spot on. The thing with the Buffalo and all the narratives about next week's game, there's no such thing as a real test one week or the other. Every game is a real test for a young quarterback at the NFL level in his first full starting season, him being as inconsistent as he is. If he bombs next week's, it doesn't change the fact that he aced this past week's. Everything is cumulative toward the end of the season. And to answer your previous question, Chad, why aren't people happy? It's because they have a narrative about Drew Lock. And that narrative, and it happens in politics a lot. It happens on scopes well outside football. People have little boxes they create for certain things, and they will do everything in their power to justify and rationalize and excuse away facts and realities to fit inside that box. And if you don't fit inside that box, if you don't conform to that box, you are the outcast. You are at fault. You are the one who's in the wrong. It's closed-minded stuff when it comes to a quarterback. It's closed-minded stuff. It comes to any facet of life. Those of us with eyeballs and patience and a brain that functions can see he's going to take steps back. He's going to take steps forward. The key is consistency. But yesterday, in a singular game, was the most encouraging we've seen from Locke. I think that fact is a fact. It's not challengeable.
For what it's worth, I know there's even a couple guys at MHH, they hate this, what I'm about to say, that quarterback wins. Wins are not a quarterback stat. But I'm still going to throw this out there, okay? Of the quarterbacks drafted in 2019 and 2020, there's only one quarterback today that has a winning record. His name is Drew Lock. So how bad do you really have it? Those of you who've been eating your heart out over Kyler Murray or Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, you really are looking that gift horse in the mouth. We'll get more into it, Zach, but we got to, as we're approaching 11 minutes here, we got to get to some quick matters of business, starting with the sponsor of tonight's live stream pod.
Yes, as always, tonight's live stream podcast is brought to you exclusively by sportsbetting.com. Broncos country, listen up. As you well know, gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado, and here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for sports fans just like yourselves. Sharp odds and low juice. In-house bookmakers. They're not a third-party service. They have reduced juice and the best prices you will find anywhere out there. Hassle-free bonuses with a one-time rollover. That means when you bet the money, the bonus is yours after you bet it one time. Whereas other sites, they make you bet it from 5 to 30 times to keep that rollover bonus money. Finally, 24/7 live customer support. When you contact sportsbetting.com, you are always getting a real live human being in the good old US of A. Never someone overseas, never a robot, always a real live human. But here's the kicker. At sportsbetting.com, you get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000. Not just one bet, guys, but all of your bets. Play for a week, and if your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com will cover 100% of the difference up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So head on over to sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That's sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on a risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000.
All right, guys, just a couple quick things. We'll dive right back in. Follow the podcast on Twitter at HuddleUpPod, the main account at Mile High Huddle. Zack Kelberman at Kelberman NFL, myself at Chad and Jensen. Check out the merch store if you are of a mind to. Gentle reminder here. For some reason, it's not clicking. HuddleUpPod.com. Get your swag on. Get a hat, get a T-shirt. It's another way to support what we're doing here at MHH. Also, shout out to our Facebook supporters. You guys have some really good things coming your way starting January 2021. Some content unique and dedicated only to our official Facebook supporters. If that's something you'd be interested in on Facebook, as our community is growing over 91,000 on Facebook, click the big blue button on our page. You can become a supporter. You're in like Flynn. We appreciate it. If you're not in a position to do those things, we ask that you do these three things. All right. We're just happy to have you with us either way. Just listening, just viewing, just being in the stream is supporting what we're doing here. But we ask that you do these three things. Subscribe, first and foremost. Like this video on YouTube and Facebook. It's crucial. And then the litmus test is number 3. If we're doing a good job for you, we might sometimes disagree. We might not always see every single issue eye to eye. But if you think we're doing a good job for you, share this video out there. Help us continue to grow and reach new like-minded Broncos fans just like you.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Man, it feels nice to celebrate a Broncos win. And what better way to do that than with Coors Hard Seltzer? Because this is not your average seltzer, gang. Rooted in Coors' long history of sustainability is a brand inspired by a generation that wants to do good in the world with a mission to restore America's rivers. Never before has it been so easy to make a difference, make an impact, be an activist, and never before has it been so enjoyable. Coors Hard Seltzer is launching the world's easiest volunteer program. Whatever you're doing, by simply cracking open a can of Coors Hard Seltzer, you're volunteering. Our waterways, gang, are at risk. 80% of America's rivers, they're drying up. But through a partnership with Change the Course, Coors Hard Seltzer is helping to protect and restore America's rivers. Each 12-pack of Coors Hard Seltzer, here's how it works, restores 500 gallons of fresh water to U.S. rivers and the communities that depend on them. And the results, 1 billion gallons of water restored to 16 river basins across the U.S., including the Colorado River. And that's just year one. You get 4 refreshing flavors, 1 cool cause. Enjoy naturally flavored black cherry, mango, lemon lime, or my favorite, grapefruit, and the specs are in, gang. Coors Hard Seltzer is 4.5% ABV. And Zach, it's only 90 calories.
Man, Chad, I am hyped after a big quality Broncos victory. I'm celebrating with my Coors Hard Seltzer. I got my mango flavor. It's my personal favorite. Combining football and Coors Seltzer is the way to go for any football fan, Chad.
So join the world's easiest volunteer program. By simply drinking Coors Hard Seltzer, you can volunteer to restore America's rivers. You buy Coors Hard Seltzer, you help restore 500 gallons of water into America's rivers. It's really that simple. So visit CoorsSeltzer.com to find Coors Hard Seltzer near you. That's CoorsSeltzer.com.
For every 12-pack sold through 8/31/2021, Coors will purchase services from Change the Course to restore 500 gallons of fresh river water. Details at CoorsSeltzer.com. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
All right, Rich Simpson with the super chat. Good to see you, my friend. Really appreciate that. He says, hey, fellas, sorry I've been gone a bit. Anyway, love Locke and have been rooting for his success all season. Need to see this consistency now. I still think we keep him going forward. But I like Trey Lance, though. Appreciate you, Ridge. You know, here's the thing to keep in mind, all right? You got to throw out the New Orleans game because, he didn't play, but it kind of interrupted his modest momentum he built up. But, Zach, following that first pick or the pick on the first possession against Miami, Drew played a really good game against a winning team against the Dolphins and beat the Dolphins. Then in Kansas City, again, throws a pick on the opening possession and then goes on until the final possession to play actually a pretty solid game, all things considered, factoring in the quality of the opponent, all that stuff. And then he goes into Carolina and, has a powerhouse performance. So I submit, Zach, and it might be a recency bias, but I submit that Locke has shown a trend. Has it been consistent? I'll just say he's shown a trend for improved play over his last 3 starts. So I'm with Ridge. I want to see him continue that in these final 3 games.
You know how I think it's a tangible show of progress is that he was just a fourth quarter quarterback not too long ago against the Chargers. He was known as turning his game on in the fourth quarter. And then, like you mentioned, after the Dolphins game, that was a first quarter interception. Then he became, he has to get the turnover out of his system before he settles down. Now, what we saw yesterday was the full, what I can say and what you can say is a 4-quarter performance by Locke and the Broncos. So, yeah, in that sense, I do think he's growing and I do think he's taking a step forward in his development. But what's a boon for him and what's helping him is right play calling, Chad. Is Pat Shurmur devising the right game plan and unlocking Drew, pun intended, to get the most out of his arm and most out of the Broncos offense. So as long as that keeps moving down the right path, the proper path, you're going to see Locke take steps forward because, again, it all comes down to coaching. It's the simplest rule in the NFL.
All right, let's really quick before we grab the next super or comment here. We got this is the aftermath episode, and there is some collateral damage. Surprise, surprise for your Denver Broncos coming out of another game. We saw Duke Dawson leave early in Carolina, turns out torn ACL. Then we saw Tolliver, who was, the backup to the backup to the backup, leave the game as well, turns out ACL. The Broncos didn't have too many corners left. They got Devontae Bosby, they got Michael Ojemudia, and the Hairston kid that they signed last week. That's it, dude.
And then
you had the article on this covering some of the developments at Dove Valley today, Zach. But what's your analysis and how do the Broncos move forward from here?
I mean, look at the quarterbacks they have to face with this injury-marred secondary. They have Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and Derek Carr. That's kind of a murderer's row considering the circumstances, and you hit on it perfectly. It's Bosby and Ojemudia as the starters. You have Will Parks playing some cornerback, even though he's a natural safety. You have Hairston. I believe Elijah Holder can play some cornerback, but it's a really scary situation. Now, you're down Boye, you're down Bassey, you're down Callahan, you're down Duke Dawson, you're down Tolliver. Can we say they're hashtag cursed in that cornerback corpse? Emphasis intended, Chad. It's a really scary situation. They have no one in that back end. They're going to have to either bring someone up off the practice squad or sign someone just for depth.
Will Parks was a godsend in Carolina, and I don't just mean because he had that great sack for a 16-yard loss, but he was a force. He was like a Swiss Army knife, similarly to how he was for Fangio last season, especially down the stretch. He literally picked up right where he left off, but that's not his forte. Playing nickel corner is not his forte. You can get away with it here and there in a game, but if you rely on Will Parks to be a nickel corner, all right, to be that slot corner, it's going to end up coming back to bite you in the rear end, especially with, like in Buffalo, you're going up against a Cole Beasley who's a twitchy, short area, fast, short area twitchy. I mean, that's not Will Parks' forte unless he can get his hands on him early in the route, and right off the line of scrimmage, bump and run, jam him. But Will Parks, he's a physical guy. And if you ask him to do that on every single route, it's only a matter of time, Zach, where it gets a little grabby beyond that 5-yard limit, and then the yellow laundry falls. So they got to bring someone else in.
They have Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. He plays some slot as well. So that'd be a scary situation, Stephon Diggs versus Will Parks. But if anything, this guarantees Bosby gets more playing time, and he never should have not gotten playing time. He should have always been ahead of Bassey, I think, on the depth chart, certainly ahead of Devontae Harris and Duke Dawson. He performed well. He had the game-clinching pass breakup, Chad, in yesterday's game. He's always been a good scheme fit for Vic Fangio, and Fangio said in his press conference today he was impressed by Bosby's game. So if there's a silver lining to this, we're going to see more big Boz energy in the weeks ahead.
But it was a quintessential Fangio underhanded compliment because as he compliments, he also disses Bosby for, he let a few get completed underneath in front of him that he was kind of slow to react to. Real quick, JB, that is a luscious beard, my dog. I mean, you need some like beard oil or something, dude. That's a luscious beard.
Promo code Huddle.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Let's grab Logan. John, appreciate the super chat, Logan. It's good to see you, my friend. He says, some of y'all still want to put Brett Rippon in. I don't know about that. I haven't seen too many calls for that. But Logan, thank you. Zach, you had an interesting story, though. Last night after the game, Drew was asked about Brett and just kind of that relationship. And he talked about some of the advice he's actually taken and accepted from his backup, Brett Rippon.
Well, first of all, isn't it funny, Chad, how there's no calls for Rippon? There's no calls for Blake Bortles. There's no calls for another quarterback after Locke plays his game yesterday. But, Coach Brett Rippon is inevitable at this point. The guy is just a mentor for Locke on the sideline. And he said to him, you're a special player, but you have to do your job. And doing your job entails taking what's in front of you and using that to set up the deep ball. He really brought Locke back down to earth yesterday and gave him some tough love, but perfect advice that worked out against the Panthers. They took what was in front of him around the line of scrimmage, high percentage completions, and it set up the deep balls to Hamler. That is how you run an offense, and that is how you quarterback against any defense in the NFL. Thank God, Chad. Drew Lock has a mentor like Rippon compared to last year when Flacco was ignoring him.
Yeah, I would definitely advise everyone head on over to milehighhuddle.com after tonight's stream and read this article because he does share some really interesting insights of the relationship that he has built with Brett Rippon. And you can tell it's not some kind of a subservient, you're my backup, how dare you dynamic.
Oh, no, the opposite.
These are bros. And it's like, it's like if your best friend pulls you aside and he's like, hey dude, you need to chill on this, or have you ever thought about maybe doing this instead of what you're doing? You might flare a little, but most of the time, if it's your bro, if it's your big brother or something, you're going to go, all right, I'll listen. And what's crazy about this, Zach, is that they came in together, right? They were rookies last year together. One got drafted high, second round pick. One didn't get drafted. I think you're right that it kind of is a foreshadowing of Brett Rippon's ultimate destiny in coaching at some point, but it also shows you how much respect Drew has for Rippon's insight.
Let me tell you something. I want that person to pull me over and say, listen, you're doing this wrong, because that's a true friend. That's a true bro, is to stop you before you embarrass yourself more or hurt yourself more or hurt your team more in this case. And Brett Rippon understands playing quarterback, obviously. He recognizes Drew Lock's talent, his physical talent, and he's trying to help him put it together mentally. It's too bad we can't put Brett Rippon's brain in Drew Lock's body. We'd have the perfect quarterback.
All right, let's grab this super from the Broncos Wizard. Mundungus Creevy jumping in. It's good to see you, Mike. Appreciate the super chat, as always, my brother.
Just a little
He says, Drew throws a good pass. Kelberman, great throw, lock. Hold on, let me do this. I gotta do the emphasis right. Drew throws a good pass. Kelberman, great throw, lock. He looks great. Drew throws a pick. Kelberman, Shermer's fault. And then he's got like a, smiley, laughy face. Love you guys. Look, we love you too. And maybe sometimes, Mike, it comes off that we don't hold Drew accountable. But I think at the same time, that's also picking and choosing some of the things we've said, because this season, at differing points when it's justified, we've been highly critical of Drew Lock. But more than, just keep in mind, Mike, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Drew Lock at certain points in the season has struggled terribly, and so has Pat Shermer to figure out how to help him.
Yeah, Mike, you watch enough podcasts. I think you know better than to have some blanket black and white statement or to try to put me in that narrative box that I won't fit in. It's been both. The complicity lies with everyone involved in the Broncos offense, specifically Pat Shermer and Drew Lock, the quarterback and the coach. When they work well together, you saw what can happen yesterday. But go back and watch the Raiders, the post-game Raiders podcast, the post-game Chiefs podcast. I am tearing into Lock. I said it was his worst performance. He has to be better. I even said he was starting to lose me not too many weeks ago. So I've been highly critical, and I always will be. I will give praise where it's warranted, and Chad and I will criticize where it's warranted. We will always call it like it is and never pander to one side of the aisle or the other.
Eddie Vasquez jumping in. And by the way, one of the reasons for that, all right, is that we think he's got potential. Now, this is not a potential-based business, right? This is the NFL's production-based business. At a certain point, it's incumbent on every young player, right, to convert that potential into production on the field. But you also have to have the perspective in terms of, making sure your expectations are set correctly, because, again, I think QB envy has a lot to do, Zach, with how Broncos country so quickly turned on Drew Lock. I don't want to paint with too broad of strokes because it's not everybody, and it's probably not even a majority. But how that swath of Broncos country turned on him in large part has to do with, especially early in the season, seeing Kyler putting up volume and winning games, and the same for Joe Burrow. Well, not really winning games, but then Justin Herbert and all that stuff.
Not really winning games.
Not winning games as well, but that contrast. And then they see Drew out there really struggling and, inconsistent, disjointed, showing regression at times. And I understand why you go, why can't we have that? These guys are coming straight out of the draft and doing this. Why can't Drew do that? But in the NFL, no situation is exactly the same.
No, it's like snowflakes. What do they say? No two snowflakes are exactly the same. No two human beings. It's really true. Every quarterback situation is unique in the NFL. And you can have a quarterback that's similar to another quarterback or very similar to another quarterback, but they're never going to be two of the same situations. It's different circumstances, different times. Drew Lock was never going to be, Chad, and I'll say this for the 20th time. He was never going to be the next Mahomes or the next Favre, the next Romo. He was always going to be the next Drew Lock, whatever that was.
Eddie Vasquez jumping in. It's good to see you, my friend. Appreciate you. He says, at work, we'll listen fully when I get home. Thanks for always giving me something to look forward to. Love you, Chad and Zach. Hashtag hit that like button. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life.
Thank you,
Much
Eddie.
love to you, Eddie. Appreciate you, my dog. Zach, there is also – all right, we'll talk about this now. Actually, hold on to that for just 1 second, John. I want to get this out of the way or else I'm just going to forget. Brandon McManus is going on the CV reserve list because he is considered a close contact risk. So he was exposed to someone outside the building that is infected with the bug. And so just like what happened with Drew, what happened with Brett, what happened with Blake Bortles, and with Shelby, he has to go on the reserve list 5 days. All right, so you look ahead, right? This is a semi-short week for the Broncos. They play on a Saturday this week against the Bills. Does he have enough time? You got Tuesday, Zach, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If he tests negative, he's going to be good to go. But I want to remind everybody of something unfortunate. Shelby Harris, similar, close contact exposure, went into quarantine. 4 days in a row, he was a negative. And then on that fifth day, walks in ready to go right back into the building, and it's a positive. So as long as Brandon does continue to test negative each and every day between now and the game, he should be good to go. But that's why the Broncos brought in Taylor Russolino, the former XFL kicker.
Yeah, based on precedent, though, it's safe to assume the NFL is going to make the Broncos kick without a kicker on Saturday, right? They're going to rule all of them ineligible. Let me just pose this out there. This doesn't really have to do with anything specifically, but is McManus annoying anyone else on Twitter? The kind of the way he refers to himself, and he talks a lot of, I don't want to say trash, but he kind of talks a big game publicly and privately, the way he tweets. He holds himself in a very high regard, and it's like, dude, you just missed 2 extra points. It's like, can you do your job better before you act like you're this big shot? You're a kicker, you're a good kicker, but let's settle down a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm being a Grinch this holiday season.
Listen, that was one of my gripes with Brandon McManus for a long time, is that he was a little I don't know what's uppity, I guess, for a kicker, throwing his helmet, saying passive aggressive, critical things about his head coach in post game press conferences. Things like that. And then, it's what's ironic about yesterday's performance for the kid McManus is that outside of 1 or 2 that he would want back, 1 missed from 50, 1 missed extra point all year long, he's been money. He set a new single season record for the most field goals made from 50 plus. He's been having a Pro Bowl caliber. I'm not going to say he's been Pro Bowl this year, but a Pro Bowl caliber type of year. Then he goes into Carolina when his team needs him. He's just lucky. He's just lucky that those 2 missed extra points didn't ultimately come back to haunt them, although it very well could have. If the Panthers found a way to score on that final drive, Broncos would have been buried, right, and it would have been at the feet of Brandon McManus. But what do we know about this kid real quick, Zach, that the Broncos brought in as a fail-safe?
He's Italian. That's pretty much it.
Yes, indeed. He's from Louisiana, all right? Former XFL guy, former AFL guy, former CFL guy. 31 years old, here's everything I know about him right here in this paragraph. He's a 31-year-old former XFL kicker for the St. Louis Battlehawks, a Louisiana native. Rosalino went to school at Millsaps College. He also played in the CFL and AFL. But Zach, he's never played. He's never kicked in the NFL in a real game. And here's to hoping that debut doesn't come anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough ask, though. Can you imagine if McManus can't play? His first NFL game action is against the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, that's not an easy ask for a young kicker, but I think McManus will be okay. He said he plans to play Saturday for whatever that is worth. And listen, I see some comments. I'm not trying to trash him for being confident. It's just that he has like a very high level of self-worth, and it seems like, and it's staggering to me how he thinks he can kind of speak for the Broncos locker room at times. It's like, you're not the representative, overall, I think, of how they feel.
Well, in one sense, he is, though. If you think about, I don't mean to be the fly in the ointment. He is the NFLPA player rep for the Denver Broncos.
But I mean, truthfully,
maybe that's why he feels like he has, a little bit more leeway to be a mouthpiece than what you see from most kickers traditionally.
Maybe. I
still don't like it, though. I don't like it.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Let's see what else we got here, gang. Oh, all right. So we've been getting asked a lot about, hey, man, Netani Muti balled out of control in his NFL debut at right guard yesterday. Graham Glasgow, he's kind of been forgettable up to this point. The Broncos signed him 4-year, $44 million deal. They're on the hook for Glasgow this year and next year. We can look at the guaranteed money, but it was encouraging to see Muti play well in a crisis type of situation where the team really needed to call on him, Zach. But do you really expect that to alter the equation up front when they're tied to Glasgow for basically through this and next year?
Well, first of all, are we allowed to say that he played well, or is that, being an apologist for Netani Muti like we are Locke?
Don't get in your head yourself, dude. It could have been an outlier.
Yeah, let's see him do it next week, see if he's consistent. I was very encouraged, and I think he is the future at right guard, but like I mentioned yesterday, the way that Glasgow's contract is structured, the Broncos are stuck with him next season, and I think he was always viewed as a multi-year contributor or starter for Denver, but this season, man, I want to call it a wash and I want to call it a lemon, Chad, because he wasn't even that good when he was on the field. And Muti came in and he was stoning bodies at the line of scrimmage. They were moving people back and run blocking. I thought for his first big NFL game action, I thought he was very, very encouraging. This was always the rap on him. He was a good player when he was healthy. The problem is he wasn't healthy very often. So here's hoping he can stay off the trainer's table.
I just want to take a look at this real quick over at our friends at Over the Cap. Here's Graham Glasgow's numbers real quick. So this year, of course, on the books, 2021, his cap number, he's got an $8,400 or $8.4 million base salary. His cap number is $12 million. If the Broncos were to cut him, it's a $17.4 million dead cap charge. Here's how it gets worse. 2022, it's a little less painful, but if they were to move on from Glasgow, Zach, it's $6 million in dead money in 2022 and $3 million in dead money in 2023 because of the signing bonus he garnered, which was, I'll tell you, let me see here. Glasgow signed a 4-year contract worth $44 million. $26 million is guaranteed. So that's why you've got the dead money if you move on beyond 2021.
Isn't the savings though for 2022? Isn't it like they save more than they lose in dead money? Isn't it like $2 million difference?
Let's take a quick look. We can all follow along on this. So
I believe I might be wrong.
Here's how it shakes out. All right, 2021. So he would have on 2022, his cap number would be $12 million. So they would come out $6 million ahead if they were to cut him. Right. Because the dead cap charge would be $6 million as opposed to his cap number of $12 million. And that would improve to a cap savings of $11 million the year prior. But it's still, it's ironic because, Zach, for the first 5 years I'll say the first 6 years of John Elway's front office regime, the Broncos were one of the top 2 or 3 best teams in the league when it comes to avoiding dead money. But in all these losing years, post Super Bowl 50, they become one of the teams with the most dead money. And if things were to change with Glasgow, if they sour on him, or if he doesn't kind of turn the ship around, he would be another guy adding to that down the road.
It's just when you think about the Broncos committed $51 million to Juwan James and $44 million to Graham Glasgow, $95 million overall, $58 million in guarantees between the two players. They've combined to play 13 games out of a possible 29 now. So it's that right side of the offensive line for Denver next year with James and Glasgow. They are locked into those spots, starting spots, because of their salary alone. But that's the only reason, is they've drafted, the Broncos have drafted well on the left side, and they've kind of ignored the right side with some of the recent moves in the draft. I hope that Glasgow can pick it up, but he's looking like a Juwan James to me, Chad. He's not even available. When he is, he's not that impressive.
Yeah, I really expected to see more from him in terms of just better play. I expected to see a more competent pro, and he hasn't been bad. He just hasn't been Luis Vasquez 2012. Given a big contract, a lucrative free agent deal, goes on to produce an all-pro year in year one, justifying that contract. And then even 2013, he started getting banged up in those ensuing years a little bit, did Luis Vasquez. But 2015, man, him and Evan Mathis is that guard tandem. He played a little right tackle in between. He was just a lunch pail, whatever they needed guy, and the Broncos more than got their money's worth out of Luis Vasquez. They're not getting that up to this point with Glasgow, but there's time to turn the ship around. Now, John, you had that question. I didn't see who it was from about, couldn't he play other positions? Yeah, you could move Glasgow to center. You could put him at center, but then you're giving up on a highly drafted Lloyd Cushenberry, who has finally started to show some signs of progress. I don't love that idea.
I don't either. And then you open up a hole at right guard. Okay, you put Moody in there, but what if he gets injured? Then you're right back into square one. The Broncos signed him to be a right guard. That's why they drafted a pure center in Cushenberry. So it's either he succeeds next year at right guard or he's shown the door in 2022. The takeaway here is the Broncos are stuck with Glasgow, just like Juwan James next season.
All right, let me see what else we got here in the stream from Dennis Woods, rocking the dad hat. The MHH dad hat like a boss. Good to see you. And thank you, Dennis. He says, give him, talking about Locke, a full offseason, training camp, reps, coaching, preseason, etc. If he doesn't do well in 2021, I'll consider bringing in a different quarterback. I agree. I really do. I mean, and as you guys know, I said that last week before the Panthers game. I'm inclined to give Drew Lock 2021, double down, if you will, in terms of, look, John Elway went to bat building the nest last season, not only Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler in picks 1 and 2, but Albert Okwuegbunam in the 4th round. Drew was involved in that pick. Elway called him and got his insight, got some advice on the player before he made the pick. Then you look at free agency, bringing in Graham Glasgow, bringing in Nick Van Nett. The whole point was to build around Drew. And then the pandemic came in and basically crushed what opportunity was there for him to get on the same page with all his new supporting cast, Zach, and all, the new scheme. So I want to see that That's one of the reasons why I'm conflicted. I have not been impressed with Shermer, but I wonder if you don't end up cutting off your nose to spite your own face if you relieve him of duties at the end of the season, because Drew Lock needs some kind of consistency. And we're never going to know how he could do consistent, in that vein of being consistent, if you don't give him consistent coaching, consistent scheme.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if they can build on what we saw yesterday, then Pat Shurmur and Drew Lock could be a pairing that works for the future, not just this season. I want to say, and it's a certainty that Lock is on the roster next season. Whether he starts all 16 games or how many games the Broncos play next year, I do not know that. But I think he'll be given the first dibs at starting quarterback. They'll have a better backup on the roster, either through the draft or free agency or a trade. It's going to be Lock's. It's going to be tilted in his favor. It's the what ifs. What could have been this year with a full supporting cast? What could have been this year without a ruined offseason? What could have been this year with a full slate of reps? If he can show development the next 3 games to close out the season, I think that will assuage the Broncos' doubts about Shurmur and the future, and they will go into next season with the same setup they have now.
All right, we got a super coming in from Big Kevin. KP in the house, one of our superstars in our community. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, it took Baker 3 years. Seems like he gets it now. 2 offensive coordinators and playbooks for 3, not to mention the injuries. Many wanted to cut Bowles too, and now look. Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you say, like, look at how long it took John Elway to figure things out, or look, Peyton Manning, or this quarterback or that quarterback. You can do that, and you can relate it to, the Garrett Bowles thing, how patient the Broncos were there, and it finally paid some dividends. But that's really more of an apples to oranges comparison in terms of quarterback to left tackle. Right. It's unfortunate. It's inconvenient. But quarterbacks have a different set of expectations placed upon them in this league, which is you got to, even if you don't hit the ground running, even if you're not Andrew Luck straight out of the box onto the field and just setting the NFL on fire, you have to, within a pretty relatively short span of time, show clear signs of being on that path, clear signs of being on that progression track, if you will. And Zach, he did that last year, right? He comes in and leads the Broncos to a 4-1 finish, plays really, really well, 7-3 touchdown to interception ratio and all that. And then this year, because of all these weird outlying factors and mitigating problems, it's this. And Drew's just kind of lost in the roller coaster, so to speak. So if he can really show those like he did in Carolina, like I said earlier, I'm going to take it all the way back to Miami, starting in the Miami game to the end of the season. If each game he just continues to build on it and show progress, that's what it means to say, hey, I'm a young guy and I'm showing progress towards the ultimate goal, which is proving that I can be the future franchise guy, that I'm the answer at the quarterback position. And Zach, he hasn't proved that yet, but he's got to continue to show evidence toward that in order to get the benefit of the doubt from fans and from the team. I still think the team is locked in on him for 2021. No pun intended.
I agree with you. The comparison to Baker Mayfield's always thrown me off because Baker was the number 1 overall draft pick. I mean, Locke was a second-round pick, 42 overall. It's a much different ballgame. But let me ask you guys a question. What's the reason Baker looked so bad last year under Freddie Kitchens? Is that his name? I forgot the name of the Browns coach. Yep. And what's the reason he looks so good this year under Kevin Stefanski? It's coaching. Kevin Stefanski is a rookie coach. He had no offseason either. He lost the same amount of reps that Shurmur lost with Locke. And look what they're 9-3 this year, or whatever they are. They're going to be, 10-3 after tonight. They're playing really good ball because they simplified things for Baker Mayfield and they play to his strengths. He lost Odell Beckham this year. It's like losing Cortland Sutton. It's a number 1 receiver. Yet he's still trucked on. That team is still winning. They win with the running game and they use that to set up the pass. So it all comes down to coaching. If Locke is coached the right way and they maximize his talent, good things can happen like we saw yesterday.
From our friend Jeremy, a.k.a. Black Knight 232, he says, here's my 2 cents on this. If Locke does the exact same thing in the Bills game, then that's great. However, if the Broncos win but Locke looks bad, then it was just a lightning in a bottle. Listen, if the Broncos beat the Bills, it's not going to be because Drew Lock played bad, just for what it's worth. But still, the premise is I can't quite get on board with that, Zach, because at this stage, you take what you can get from your young quarterback as he's developing. You want to see him show constant progress. but you can't expect him to be perfect 24/7. And meanwhile, you've got the coach still trying to kind of figure out the best way to groove with this dude when he didn't have 1,600 reps in the offseason. And I think you're going to continue to see, even against a really good Bills defense, Locke trend in that direction because they've gotten all these reps now throughout the season. And unfortunately, it was live bullet reps where the games counted and all that stuff. But all the reps they missed out on early, now they've got them under their belt. And where they're at now is probably where they would have been like week 3, week 4, if they would have had a real offseason. And I think you're going to continue to see him build on that against the Bills.
This is what I was saying earlier, though. I mean, why is the real test coming against Buffalo? Why wasn't a test coming against Carolina yesterday? And if he has a bad game against Buffalo, it doesn't change what he did against Carolina. Those two things never work hand in hand. He can't be judged from one week to another. You have to take the full body of work at the end of the year and make your opinion, just like the Broncos will, on Locke as the quarterback of the future. It's a game-by-game progression with him. If they go out and bomb, if he fails his test against Buffalo, it doesn't change the good that he's done this season. It doesn't make him a bust. If they go out and, Chad, you nailed it. If they win this week, it's because Locke stepped up and he made plays to combat Josh Allen. If he wins this week, it doesn't necessarily mean he's the guy or he's the face of the franchise. It's too reactionary. And maybe, Chad, you and I are just gray people. We're not black and white kind of people. We're a little more realistic than idealistic, but I don't see Locke as, good, bad, good, bad, good Drew, bad Drew. It's really the process of a young quarterback. You're going to see some good, some bad, some good. It's not a clear pattern and not a clear path you can follow game by game.
A big part of it, too, is trying to divine how the Broncos view this. And I submit to you, based on everything I've been told, reading the tea leaves, reading between the lines of what John Elway has said, Vic Fangio throughout the year, they have kept this entire thing, as disappointing as being at 5-8 heading into week 15 is. They've kept this entire thing in perspective, understanding the unique hurdles that Locke and Shermer and the entire offense and the team, frankly, have had to overcome this year, and they're not overreacting. And maybe if there was a different ownership situation, it might be different in terms of how they would ultimately view Drew. But I think they've kind of stayed the course, and that's never really wavered. They might have at some point had a few doubts and have had some concerns and, a little hand-wringing behind closed doors and a little pounding of head against the wall at times. But I think overall, from a macro sense, John Elway, Vic Fangio, the football decision-makers in Denver have never really, they're not as up and down as fans are. Fans live and die by the game to game, right. And that they kind of live and die more on the year-to-year type of basis. Mohammed jumping in with a very generous super, our MHH male model, rocking the trucker hat, rocking the hoodie like a boss. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, finally, the kids are going to bed. I can enjoy the podcast. I feel you, dude. I know exactly how it goes.
Hopefully you are enjoying, though, Mohammed. Thank you for stopping in tonight.
Good to see you. All right, we're sitting here at 45 minutes. We got a little time left here. Lawrence Rivera jumping in with a super. Thank you, my friend. It's good to see you. And Lawrence, if you're on Twitter, reach out and connect, shout out to Zach and I so we can connect with you and shout you out after these shows. Because I try to find you on Twitter after, you've been really active on Super Chat the last few weeks, and I can't find you. So if you're on Twitter, reach out, let us know who you are. But he says, I don't know. I think it's just me, but no way did Locke's performance look as good as Manning's or Elway's 158.3 rating games. Manning literally went 2 drives without an incompletion. It's insane how he got to 158.3. And Zach, I'll somewhat agree with Lawrence in that for those of you that were with us in the halftime stream yesterday in the rapid reaction, I was like, hey, man, more good than bad. But early on, Drew still kind of feels a little disjointed. But then in the second half, man, he just turned it on and played. He just took it to another level. And that's what you've been wanting to see, because it's not like Zach, he was void of production in the first half. He did produce in the first half, but then he took it to another level in the second half. You want to see that from your young quarterback.
This takes it to a new level for me in terms of Locke criticism. Now it's bad because his rating wasn't perfect. His 149 rating wasn't good enough. He has to be a 158.3. He has to have the same rating as Peyton did or Elway did. He has to throw, not any completions. Having 4 touchdowns, 77% passing, that's not good enough, Chad. He has to go the full Monty. Let the young quarterback be a young quarterback. Let Drew Lock be Lock and not Drew Elway or Drew Manning.
All right, John, I'm not sure where we're at on the stream. I can look on the back end here. Clifton Harris says, Lock is a young Andy Dalton. He's decent, good enough to get us to a 9-7 record at best, but not good enough to dethrone Patrick Mahomes. I don't know, man. I think that, you can make the comparison because Andy was a second-round pick in his day, but I think if what you saw in Carolina is a glimpse at what the potential this offense has regardless of opponent. If you get enough time on task, you get Pat Shurmur and Drew Lock fully sharing a brain. We know the weapons are there. That's why everyone was so excited about 2020 because it was build the nest, Cortland, Fant. They did that yesterday without Cortland, without Fant. This is an offense that is going to be built with Drew as the trigger man to compete with anybody at a certain point, but it's still in the developmental process in terms of not just Drew the player, but the quarterback-coach relationship. It's going to take more time to get on that level. But I'm not removing that as a possibility, as Clifton is not good enough to dethrone Mahomes. So you're telling me if Drew Lock produces at that level yesterday against Carolina in a Chiefs game, that wouldn't have been good enough? You think maybe Mahomes would have found a way at the end where Bridgewater, got swallowed up on 4th down, that pass, and, Devontae Bosby swoops in and makes a tackle and ends their bid. Maybe Pat Mahomes finds a way to get that drive and they end up losing. But I think you saw in that game, Zach, in week 13 in Kansas City, as this team continues to still kind of find itself and the QB and the OC get on the same page, that was a competitive game against the Chiefs. And I know that's not what you hang your hat on, but they bridged a big portion of that gap against the Chiefs.
Guess who, Locke had a higher quarterback rating than? Patrick Mahomes. I'm just throwing it out there and just saying that, he played really, really well yesterday. But take it from me. I've been forced, unfortunately, to have to watch Andy Dalton this season. Locke is not Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton wishes for Locke's arm talent. He wishes for Locke's arm strength. He's always really been a game manager. He's been like a souped up version of Alex Smith. Please don't compare Drew Lock to Andy Dalton. Sam Darnold, that's an okay comparison. Those loose comparisons, not Andy Dalton. That guy is vanilla. And Drew Lock is like cookies and cream. It's two different concepts.
Mundunga says, it's just a joke. Easy, big fella. I think it's funny when you rip into Shurmur. That's all. We got you, dog. It's all good. Joshua jumping in to say, good evening to you all. Beautiful Denver Broncos fans. I'm living on cloud 9 with that win yesterday, as you should be.
Good for you, Josh.
You should be stoked, my friend. Kenneth Booker, superstar. Love you, buddy. Your mug is coming, dude. I promise you. I just had to put in a new order. That's all I could do. It ended up getting shipped to South Korea. My fault. It was an input error putting in the order. So according to the third-party provider anyway, I'm still skeptical, but it is what it is. He says, is this the blueprint? Short passes, look for the occasional deep shot. I also liked when he rolled out. If it wasn't there, he took the 5-yard run. Yes, it's the blueprint. Let me tell you the blueprint with Drew. The blueprint is, and this is what he's been missing so much for a good portion of this season, Zach, it's run the ball, naked boot, set up the play action. When it's not there, take what the defense gives you. When it is there, take your shot. If you do that, not every opponent's going to allow you to have 2 deep strikes that result in big touchdowns. But if you set it up that way and you balance, that's why I like Fangio when he's talking about, hey, what's your idea of the ideal offense? He brings out the word balance, but he doesn't talk about it in the way that fans or media might think in terms of run-pass ratio. He's talking about, all right, run-pass ratio, but what are you doing in the run game and how are you setting that up, setting up the pass game through the run game and vice versa. There are multiple levels of analysis when Fangio starts talking about a balanced offense, and you saw that yesterday. That was the blueprint. It's there, and it's not just because Shurmur finally pulled his head out, okay? Drew also really showed progress in pulling his head out, so to speak. Can't go broke, taking the profit, right? That's one of the phrases he uses, and finally you saw that, Zach, out on the field, that ethos, that philosophy. You saw him embody that. That's what's more than encouraging, I think, if you're a Broncos fan.
I love that expression. That's so great, and it's so true. And what we saw from Locke yesterday, especially on the first Hamler touchdown, Chad, he audibled that play. He audibled at the line of scrimmage. He recognized protection. He recognized the defense, and he cycled through his reads. Half the time yesterday, they weren't his first read. He was going through and scanning the field like a proper quarterback, and it just seemed like the intensity was turned up this week from a coaching and playing standpoint. It's like Pat Shurmur and Mike Shula sat locked down and coached it into him what he has to do against the Panthers defense, and they executed perfectly. That's what we want to see from Locke going forward. It's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple stuff.
Mr. Castillo jumping in. Good to see you, my friend, and thank you for the super. He says, Locke has looked really good against subpar defenses. With the Bills being the best of the last three, really need to see him perform at the top level against a top defense. Hey, man, I agree. The competition is serious this week. Not that it wasn't last week against the Panthers, but, this is, I guess you could say, an elite opponent, at least one of the better teams in the AFC. So, yeah, this is going to be a stiff test for him. But if he, again, goes into this game with that mentality of can't go broke taking a profit, you don't have to push the ball down the field every time. If the play breaks down and you break the pocket, you don't always have to look for the Mahomesian deep strike. Take what the defense gives you, and if it's not there, throw it away. One of the greatest improvements we saw from Drew yesterday, Zach, was no interceptions, and no just boneheaded throws that were almost picked where you're like, what was he seeing there? Like he played a really balanced and measured game, showed poise, showed discernment, good decision-making. And if he plays like that, he can beat any opponent. Like, it's going to be there for the taking. It's just a matter of making sure what you saw in Carolina was not a flash in the pan. You don't want to see one quarter of that type of performance only to see him fade in quarters 2, 3, or 4, or vice versa. You want to see him sustain that consistently. And I think if he even in a conservative sense, Zach, you take what the defense gives you, you check it down when it's not there. Maybe you won't go all the way till the fourth quarter when you have your first 3 and out. But this team, the way the defense is, as long as you don't turn the ball over, regardless of opponent, the Broncos will have a chance to win every single game in the fourth quarter.
He also completed passes to 8 different receivers. He only took 1 sack. I mean, he played as close to a flawless Drew Lock game as you will see him play at this stage of his career. But here's the double standard, and here's the hypocrisy when it comes to Lock derangement syndrome, those afflicted by it. The win against the Panthers means nothing, but a loss against Buffalo would mean everything. That's what I don't understand. Every game is unique. Every circumstance is unique. Just because even if they go out and he throws 3 picks against Buffalo, it does not change the steps that he took. It does not mean he went back permanently. It's a young quarterback going through the ebbs and the flows. But Chad, like we always say, they don't have to win the game for it to be a success. If they hang in there against Buffalo, if he makes some nice throws, if he continues to develop as the leader of the offense and as the quarterback of the Broncos, that will be enough for me, win or lose.
I'm really curious to see what his talking points and just kind of overall energy is on Wednesday, because last Wednesday he's like, hey, you're going to see a big jump from us in Carolina, and it came out in the wash, and I'm going to be curious to see what his tonality is on Wednesday. Paul says, with my reservations long-term with Locke, I'd rather go with him over Stafford and Ryan, etc. And you should, because even though he's not as proven as either of those guys up to this point, there's no upside really with either of those guys. You're going back to, beating your head against the wall with, we're one middle of the road, washed up quarterback away from winning it all. You're not that team. And you weren't that team even in 2015. If you don't have Peyton Manning come back into the equation in week 17 for the playoff runs, next, you don't win the Super Bowl. And now that means you needed the Hall of Fame quarterback to get you over the hump.
It's so funny to me, too, because some Broncos fans or Locke haters think that Locke is injury prone, but yet guess who I see every week with a new injury? Matt Stafford. I mean, even today he missed practice and now he might not play. I don't want that guy in my team. I would go with the young, gritty quarterback who has upside and a potential future over Stafford, who his prime has passed him by. I think he's mostly a ruined quarterback at this stage of his career, and like you hit on it, there's no future with Matt Ryan. There's no future with Matt Stafford. There's no future with any of these Band-Aid quarterbacks. You have to build from within. Draft your guy, develop your guy, and win with your guy.
Kenneth says, and thank you for the super chat, my friend, I would never say Sly is annoying. He scares me. LOL. Dude, that kickoff in which they faked the onside kinda and ended up pooching it right there. The ball just stopped on the 2. That was impressive. From Fronty Pro 4X on YouTube, Chad and Zach, what would happen if Locke bombs the last 3 games? Would Elway be looking to draft a quarterback? Your guys' thoughts. So if Drew bombs, and I guess you got to define bombs, but let's just say, more interceptions than touchdowns, Broncos lose all 3. I think it's a conversation. They got to decide how they prioritize the quarterback position in 2021. But I still think this is a team that is inclined from the front office perspective to give Drew 2021, depending on how he finishes this season, might alter, Zach, not necessarily what they do in round 1 or 2, but what they might do in free agency in terms of bringing in a more established veteran to kind of not only kind of mentor Locke, but kind of be that unspoken threat of, look, dude, we've got a guy that we can trust. If you're sucking it up in the second quarter, we'll pull you. This guy will go in. We'll Tua you, right? We'll bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick out of nowhere, and you'll disappear into the mist.
What Broncos fans don't seem to understand, though, is that Elway and the front office, they want Locke to succeed. They don't want to have to draft another young quarterback. They don't want to have to restart this process all over again. There's a reason why Elway made Locke the guy. That the veteran quarterback buck stopped with Drew Lock. There's a reason for that. Elway was very high and remains very high on Locke as a quarterbacking prospect, and he's not going to just dump him after one injury and pandemic-ruined season. So I'm with you. I think the inclination is to have Locke be the starter next season, though my own preface is it's not going to be handed to him completely. He's not going to be grandfathered in. You're not going to have a sham of a backup like a Jeff Driscoll or Blake Bortles. He will bring in a young quarterback. Could it be a Mac Jones, though, in the second or third round versus a Zach Wilson in the first round? That might be the direction to go. But Locke will be on the roster and more than likely under center next September.
All right, we are approaching the 1 hour mark, so we got to rapid fire these remaining supers. We love each and every one of you. We're never going to leave you out in the cold. DH3, my dog, I'm glad to see you here tonight. Thank you for the super chat because I wanted to give you some props, my friend. I'm trying to remember what article it was. Oh, it was the Jerry Jeudy when I came up with the footballer's serenity prayer. If you guys want, I can find that if you want. But DH3 didn't like that, and he took exception to something I said on one of the articles covering Jerry Judy's little media storm last week. But DH3, I just wanted to give you props, dude, because you, like so many of our great listeners, are going to milehighhuddle.com to help keep the conversation going, and I loved seeing it, man. And it's good if it's disagreement. If you think something I said was, poor taste or you disagree with the take, I want to hear that. And so I wanted to give you props and give you a little love because I did reply to you. I don't know if you saw that, but I just wanted to give you some props for that. He says, good evening. How do you both now feel about Melvin Gordon? He has really turned it on as of late. Lindsey deserves to be paid, but I think elsewhere. Well, he might end up getting paid elsewhere, but DH3, let's talk about Melvin Gordon because, Zach, we also learned today that his court case on the DUI isn't going to be settled until January, which means he's going to play out all of 2020. At least that's the way it's looking. Yeah. So I don't know. We saw some other comments I did anyway on YouTube about when are these guys going to admit they were wrong about Melvin Gordon? I don't know how many times we have to say it on this podcast that, he's outkicked the coverage at times this year. He's really been more than I expected him to be. I'm speaking specifically of the Jets game. I'm speaking specifically of the last 2 games. But aside from that, he's kind of just been okay, but I still don't love the contract. Nothing he's done so far this year makes me go, all right, I can live with that contract a little bit more. But that doesn't mean I can't give him his props. The last 2 games, as I put him in the winners column last night in the winners and losers article, Zach, and I said he's been the rock of Gibraltar for Drew Lock these last 2 games. You love seeing it because it also coincides with Philip Lindsay not looking like himself out there as he tries to kind of rebound from that knee injury.
We're addressing another Melvin Gordon criticism, pushback kind of question. An $8 million a year running back should produce like Christian McCaffrey healthy or Derrick Henry. And can any of you look me in the eye and tell me that Melvin Gordon has been Derrick Henry out there on the field? No. He's done some nice things for sure. He's been at times the workhorse the Broncos signed him to be, but he's also fumbled 4 times. He's also gotten outshined by Philip Lindsay at times, and the Broncos aren't even using Lindsay the correct way in their scheme. So has he been good for this offense? Yes. Has he been an asset? Yes. Has he been great or excellent? I would stop short of that. Has he been an $8 million a year running back in this day and age? I would stop short of that. Good player, not necessarily I'm going to go out of my way to praise.
For what it's worth, Kathy, just FYI, my phone. I like to keep my phone on when we stream because I got a staff of writers that are doing things, and sometimes they're texting me and stuff. And I don't like keeping it on my desk because it will buzz and you might hear it. So I keep it right in between. Sometimes it buzzes and I got to look and see what it was. But that's what it might. What are you digging for there, Chad? All right, Stu, love you, bro. Zeus McPeak, week in, week out, day in, day out. He is MHH, Mount Rushmore, face number one up there. Superstar. We love you, Zeus. We're running out of time here. Kenneth Booker, as we rapid fire. He says, thoughts on Buffalo OC as a head coach. # Korea, state of being.
Out there with Kim Jong-un.
I'm telling you, Kenneth, I'll DM you after this, and we'll talk about the snafu that was. So anyway, your thoughts, Zach?
Brian Daboll has done an incredible job transforming Josh Allen into the passer he is now. And I always laud the coaches, and Daboll has proven to be the single biggest factor in Allen's transformation. The thing with Daboll, though, is he a flash in the pan? Is he just a one-time wonder? He was with the Jets a few years back, not too long ago, before the Bills, I believe. He wasn't really great there. I mean, he was dumped by the Jets. When you're dumped by them, that's your low point. But he's done great work in Buffalo. He will get a head coaching shot. I just don't think he's going to be in the cycle where the Broncos are going to be hiring. So,
Jesse Randolph jumping in. Thank you for the super chat, Jesse. And we don't recognize your name, so welcome and thank you. Make sure you connect with us on Twitter so that we can shout you out and keep the conversation going. But he says, I'm a Bronco fan living in New England. McManus gave me a Pats loss single-footedly. Nothing better than spite wins. I forgave him right away. Love the show. That's true, man. McManus, and that's one of the things is I've been – those of you who've been with us, most of you have throughout this entire season, but I opened up this year being very skeptical of the contract the extension the Broncos gave McManus because I felt like his last 2 years were kind of lackluster. And then he proceeded to just be a weapon, man. That old McManus, the McMoney that we had seen. I mean, 6 field goals on the road against New England, nails every single one, a couple of them from 50. And for the most part, all season long, he's been money, which was what made Sundays, 2 missed extra points so out of character. But it still doesn't take away from I don't like some of his persona and some of his it kind of gets it's like a burr under the saddle, but it's not going to ruin my day.
I do like single-footedly though. That's a new one.
That's
very creative.
Our friend Adon jumping in. Good to see you on YouTube. A 6'10" Mexican. He says, Drew Lock. Are you really 6'10", by the way? Drew Lock is turning into Drew Lock. #MHH. #MHRT. Indeed, he's forging his own path. He's finding his own way. Mind blown faux show. Mundungus jumps in again. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. He says, first round pick, corner, off-ball linebacker, defensive end, or tackle, just in case the hairless wonder gets a paper cut. I'm still feeling corner, man, especially with all these injuries, dude. I'm feeling corner in round 1.
I'm not taking a defensive end. I really don't subscribe to the Broncos needing an edge rusher in the first round, so I'm going to eliminate that. You can say tackle for sure, or offensive lineman, but cornerback, given the state of the secondary, Boye might not be there. Callahan is up in the air now. You have Ojemudia. Bosby might be gone. I'm taking a corner, but I salivate thinking, Chad, about Micah Parsons in the Denver defense. I mean, wow, that would be amazing.
Agreed. And that seems like it's the one thing that's been missing from Fangio's defense in Denver to kind of take it to that Chicago or San Francisco level is that uber athletic playmaking sideline to sideline linebacker. Our friend Larry, Broncos fan, number 24 on YouTube, longtime listener, one of our superstars. Appreciate you, my friend. Good to see you, by the way. He says, I said it a few weeks ago. I want to see the Broncos win because of him. And if they lose, it's not because of Drew, is what he's saying. That's growth.
That's a good point.
Love you guys. Fair point, my friend.
It's true. And the Broncos, we were saying yesterday, Chad, they won because of his arm. They didn't win in spite of Drew Lock. And that's what, as Broncos fans and Broncos media, it's all we want to see.
Larry says with another super, and thank you, my friend. Stafford scored a whopping 0 points against the same Panthers defense 2 weeks ago. That's why it's like, look, you can dismiss the Panthers at 4-8, but it's the NFL, man, and they've made some veteran quarterbacks, some of whom there are portions of Broncos country you've been pining for in 2021. Like, man, if we could get Matt Ryan in Denver, if we could get Matt Stafford, those two that same defense made those two quarterbacks look like schmucks. So,
good word. Yeah, Detroit was actually shut out in that game. Matt Ryan in Atlanta, he was held without a touchdown pass. Herbert was held to one touchdown pass by Carolina. And didn't the Panthers beat the Seahawks, if I remember correctly? So they're not exactly that bad. They're not, this high school level peewee joke franchise. It's an NFL team.
Dennis Woods jumping in again. Thank you, my friend. He says, Shurmur needs to call a good game as well versus the Bills. I agree, but you know what? Look, the Kansas City game was just, it's Kansas City. I still think it was signs of Shurmur taking a step forward, but similar to Locke, and it's no coincidence. Again, I don't believe in coincidence. Locke played better in Miami because the game plan from Shurmur was improved. The Broncos were able to kind of keep up with and make it competitive against Kansas City because Locke played better after one bad interception to open, and because Shurmur schemed better, and the same goes for the Panthers game. So we're with you on that, Dennis.
I'll take it a step further, though. The offensive line has to have a good game. I know the receivers have to catch their passes. The running backs have to make their runs. It's never just one factor or another. It's an entire operation. There's 11 people on the field. There's several coaches on the sideline, up in the booth. It's an entire orchestra. It's a concert. And when one instrument is broken, the entire thing is off tune.
The ultimate team sport, baby.
That's right.
Manny Wise, longtime listener, longtime superstar. It's good to see you, Manny. Jumping in, appreciate you. He says, Locke and the Broncos took advantage of a Panthers' weakness on defense, which is the passing game. Great to see. True. Eric Trickle, he pointed to Jerry Jeudy as the rookie to watch in week 14 against the Panthers, and his premise was 100% on the money. It ended up being a different rookie, KJ Hamler, but the premise proved true, and that was that the Panthers were weak at corner. And you saw that come out in the wash in a big, bad way, not only with KJ Hamler's two big plays, but just overall in the passing game, the Broncos were able to really feast on them. I still want to see Jerry Jeudy get, for Locke to find a way to get him more involved and for Shurmur to find a way to get Jeudy more involved. But, with the way this season has gone, Zach, beggars can't be choosers.
I think Rasul Douglas, though, in Carolina is still having nightmares about KJ Hamler. He got roasted twice. And I said this yesterday. It seemed like for once, and I said it tonight, that the Broncos specifically game planned for Carolina's defense. It seemed like for once the Broncos coaches and Pat Shurmur, they had a specific game plan to attack an opponent's weakness. And when you devise something like that and then call plays in the game to your quarterback's strengths, 4 touchdowns, 77% completion percentage, and a victory. That's what happens.
Judah Walker jumping in. Thank you, Judah. Make sure you connect with us on Twitter so that we can shout you out after this show. He says, how does a backup quarterback help Locke? Won't that hurt Rippon's spot? So I think he's talking about bringing in like a veteran next year. I'm not convinced they're going to do that for sure. They probably will because Jeff Driscoll, if that's your fail-safe's fail-safe, I mean, that's we saw earlier this year, that ain't good. But I still think the Broncos are a lot more inclined to roll with Locke and Rippon as the guys in 2021.
And then take someone in the middle rounds, which is what I would do. Maybe a Mac Jones in the 3rd round. Then you have Locke is a veteran by this point now, and so is Brett Rippon by next season. So you have 2 veteran type players. You have a young rookie on your roster who maybe you have something and maybe you don't. You can develop, and then you're youthful at that position. And also, you're not wasting money. If you bring in a veteran like a Fitzpatrick or maybe a Carson Wentz, you're paying at least $10 million a year, whereas a rookie would be $1 million a year. It's a much big difference when the Broncos have to pay a lot of players on the roster next season.
BD, our friend Bradley, jumping in with a question for Zach. He says, I like the team chemistry. Zach, did you see how Drew Lock was talking up his receivers and the O-line between series? Good signs.
Because he's a leader, Chad, and this is the intangible quality we all saw about Locke last year, this offseason, marching with them, and he really took ownership of that position, and everyone around him respects him. That's a good sign.
Yes, Josh. Pay the man, Shelby Harris. We're with you on that.
Hey, Shelby.
Spartan2492, good to see you, my friend. Reach out to us on Twitter, connect. He says, what's up, Huddle Up Podcast? What is the solution to fix these season-ending injuries for next year? Almost every game, we lose a key player. Another strength and conditioning coach, your thoughts? Man, that's a question at the 11th hour that we could let our hair down, but we don't have time. What is your solution, Zach? Because, really it has to do so much with the pandemic affecting the offseason and whatnot. But Zach and I have been relatively vocal critics of Lauren Landau just because of the results. You can't get away from the fact that the Broncos have been inordinately affected by the injury bug.
Listen, every team, it seems like it is just ravaged right now by injuries. I mean, you look around the NFL, there's so many star players that are missing, but with the Broncos, it precedes this year. It's happened last year, it happened the year before, and most of it under Landau's watch. I'm not saying you have to fire him, but I think there's a connection to be drawn between his practices and maybe Fangio's practices and the Broncos injury. So I don't know what the answer is, but something has to change because next year, Chad, they cannot afford to lose a Sutton or lose a Von Miller.
All right, guys. What a great conversation. Very passionate, some fiery exchanges at times. And that's what it's all about. And we are grateful for each and every one of you spending some time with us here tonight across Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Twitch. Those of you who are going to be listening after the fact on whatever podcast platform is your jam, we appreciate each and every one of you. And it means a lot to have you in the stream and listening and participating and being a part of the conversation. Mile high salute to our Super Chat superstars, our Facebook supporters. Gang, seriously, we consider ourselves to be the luckiest 2 podcast hosts in the world because of your support. And DH3, it's all love, guys. I respect the work you do. Always grade A pros, even when there are differences in opinion. Much respect. And same to you, DH3. And keep it coming at milehighhuddle.com in the comments. And this goes to everybody. We want you to keep the conversation going with us. And we don't mean that in some, open-ended, way. We want you on the site when the article publishes. We got 6, 7, 8 articles a day publishing covering your team at milehighhuddle.com. We want to hear your guys' thoughts and takes on it, because we can't always get to every single comment and question here when we're live in the stream. But when it's on the website, we can. You address us directly. You drop a take under one of our articles. We can and we will. We're hanging out at milehighhuddle.com all day. Yes, we check Facebook. Yes, we check Twitter. Yes, we check our email. But that's where we're chilling. So another call to action, just like DH3. Go from the stream into the comment section over at milehighhuddle.com and Twitter as well. Follow the pod at HuddleUpPod on Twitter. Also, the main account at Mile High Huddle. My partner, Zack Kelberman, at Kelberman NFL. Myself, at Chad and Jensen, and our producer, Buona Beast, a.k.a. at John K. MHH on Twitter. But we're out of here. And, Zach, we're off tomorrow. It'll be Nick and Carl building the Broncos. But we'll be back in the saddle Wednesday night. We'll see what Drew has to say. We'll see, what some of the storylines, how they unfold between now and then. What the Broncos do at corner, if they make some additions. They almost have to at this stage. What the talking points are going to be as far as right tackle this week. Is it going to be Dotson? Is it going to be Wilkinson? We didn't really get time to dive into that tonight, but it'll be fun. So have a great start to your week, my bro.
You as well, and I'm with you. I'm very excited to see how Locke handles his presser. I hope he has some fire and kind of, shuts the haters up, so to speak.
All right, guys. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We'll see you Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.